Good Monday morning, everybody. Hope you had a great weekend. Wonderful time worshiping King Jesus, and looking forward to another week and opportunities today to speak to someone about Jesus. I hope you're praying for God to give you an opportunity to have a gospel conversation. I hope you are praying for people by name and praying that God will give you the boldness to speak for Jesus when you have an opportunity today. That's my prayer for you, and I'm hoping that you are praying that very same thing for yourself. In fact, I want to encourage you to join us this coming Sunday. We're going to have a special guest speaker who is so inspiring, so encouraging, that's going to help you have more confidence in sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. So you plan to be here Sunday morning. And then we're going to have some special training on Sunday afternoon as well. You'll hear all about that as the week goes on. So I hope you'll plan to be here Sunday for that. Chapter 2 is so different than chapter 1. Chapter 1 to me is happy because Hannah finally, after years of not having a child, prays. And God gives her a child, and Samuel, who will become a great prophet. Chapter 2 is tragic. I mean, it's just tragic. Eli, who was the judge and the leader, the priest, if you will, at the tabernacle of the Jewish nation, his two sons were acting as priests, and they were helping with the priestly functions, but they did not know God according to the scripture. In verse 12 of chapter 2, they did not know God, and then, and God even says they were worthless men. Can you imagine that? Worthless men, did not know God, and later in the chapter, down at the end of verse 22, we discover they were actually sleeping with women who were at the tabernacle to help with the religious activities. These were scoundrels. I think the NIV translates that word worthless in verse 12 as scoundrels. They were awful, and yet they were leading the worship. Not only were they sexually promiscuous and sinning that way, but they were desecrating the offering. That people would bring a meat offering to Shiloh to be offered to God, and the way it worked, they would bring this meat, and and while all of it was dedicated to God, the entire animal, not all of the animal was totally burned on the altar. After all of it was offered to God, the best part, the first part, would be taken, and it would be offered on the altar and burned completely to the Lord. The family, who was the family that was bringing the offering, they would get a certain portion back, and they would then have a feast. So it's like, think of it like dinner on the ground. You come and you give an offering, then you go outside and you have a meal. So they would take part of that animal and they would eat and have a feast as a family, part of the worship. And then the priest would also get a part of it, and that's one of the ways the people supported or provided the livelihood, if you will, for the priest. Well, what Eli's sons were doing, they were taking what they wanted first, when God was supposed to get the best and the first, and they were also taking part of what the family was supposed to get. So they were stealing from the family that was doing the offering, and they were stealing from God. I mean, they were scoundrels. They were worthless. So they were abusing worshipers. They were abusing God and the sacrifices. And Samuel, or rather Eli, their dad, confronts them, and they don't listen to him. They don't change anything, and they keep doing what they had been doing. And finally, God sends a prophet to Eli, their father. And in chapter 2, I want you to look at part of what that prophet said to Eli. He starts talking in verse 27, but in verse 29, the prophet said to Eli, "Why do you kick at my sacrifice and my offering, which I have commanded in my dwelling?" Now remember, Eli was not the one doing wrong. Eli was not stealing part of the meat from the families. Eli was not stealing the first portion that was supposed to go to God. That was his sons. But yet, through the prophet, God said to Eli, "You are doing it." How? By making, notice this. Let's just read it again, verse 20. "Why do you kick at my sacrifice and at my offering which I have commanded you in my dwelling? and honor your sons above me. Honor your sons above me by making yourselves fat with the choicest of every offering of my people Israel. Eli was not directly taking from the people and taking from God, but he was enjoying the benefits of what his scandalous sons were doing. And furthermore, notice in the middle of that verse really got my attention. God through the prophet said to Eli, you honor your sons above me. You honor your sons above me. Eli had the authority to remove his two boys from those priestly functions, but he didn't do it. Therefore, he allowed them to continue abusing the people of God and desecrating the offering of God while he enjoyed the benefits of their sin. And God rightly says, Eli, you honor your sons above me. You didn't remove them, you didn't stop them, and you benefit from their sin. You're not honoring me, Eli. And then he goes on to announce the judgment that's going to come on Eli and his descendants. And his descendants would not continue to serve in this leadership role among the people of Israel. And I got to thinking about that. Are there times in my life, maybe times in your life, when we honor our kids above God? And if so, how do we do that? Is it possible that we're honoring our children above God when we let our kids run the home? Well, is it possible we're honoring our kids above God when we let our kids make all the decisions about church? Is it possible we're honoring our kids above God when we spend so much energy, so much time, and so much money on the activities they want to do that we have very little, if anything, left over for God? Is it? I think it is. And I think it's something every mom and dad ought to think about. Because Friday in chapter 1, we saw how Hannah dedicated her son, Samuel, to the Lord, and talked about how all of our kids should grow up knowing that Jesus really is Lord and that he's priority number one. Well, listen, when the kids run the home, they don't learn that Jesus is Lord and number one. When the kids make all the decisions about church, they don't learn that Jesus is Lord and number one. And when the kids are so busy with all these other activities that it takes all of your time and your resources and energy, and you don't have what you need to give Jesus, they don't learn that Jesus is Lord and number one. What are you letting your kids get by with? What are you teaching them when you do? And how does God really feel about it? Something to think about, isn't it? I'll see you tomorrow as we look at chapter 3.